Hi, this is Mara BioGea. In this video, I'll introduce you some of the main players that led human evolution, meanwhile debunking some myths about it. Myth 1. Humans have stopped evolving. Meet the Uru people. They have been living in the Bolivian highlands for about 4,000 years, in areas where the water has high arsenic concentrations, sometimes 20 times above the permitted level, and these populations safely drink this water. After studying the genome of a group of Uru women with this superpower, they found variants in one gene that breaks down arsenic, allowing Uru people to destroy and excrete the toxin effectively. It's a clear example of recent evolution. We must also get rid of the misconception of those who, while admitting that evolution is unstoppable, understand it as a predictable event. This is an image of what, according to some, the human being would look like in thousands of years. Large eyes, large brain. Well, I don't know about the eyes, but our brain is decreasing. The red line of the graph shows the variation in the cranial capacity of various hominids. It increases at different rates, and when we are close to the current moment, about 3,000 years ago, the red line falls. We increasingly have smaller brains. That proves that it's very difficult to predict the future. What can be predicted is that human beings will continue evolving. Myth 2. Symbolic thinking appeared with Homo sapiens. Meet Lafagacy child, a Neanderthal 3-year-old boy who lived 0.04 million years ago. He was found in a grave. In the deepest part of the grave was the body, and the head was separated 1 meter away. 3 flint tools appear on the remains, and above the head a triangular stone bearing 18 hollows, 16 of them arranged in pairs. It's clearly a ritual burial. What does this prove? For many, it's evidence that the Neanderthal had symbolic thought, a type of thought that until recently we believed was exclusive to our species, Homo sapiens. But what does it mean, thinking with symbols? Explaining it is more difficult than showing it. What does this image suggest to you? If you see that is something beyond 2 electricity boxes with some lines painted in black, it's because you have symbolic thought. And how can you find out if extinct species have symbolic thought? The evidence refers to the use of pigments, ritual burials, ornamentation, and artistic creations. The burial of Lafagacy child fulfills the first 2. There are many more examples. The use of ochre was widespread among Neanderthals. These eagle claws were found in a site occupied by Neanderthals in Croatia. You can see the marks left by the rope that linked one claw to another. Ropes that were used to form a necklace. So yes, they adorned their bodies. What about art? In Spain, in the Pasiega cave, you will find these geometric paintings made by Neanderthals, at a time when sapiens hadn't yet reached Europe. They are not the only ones. There are also these fingerprints left by a Neanderthal child in Malaga, and this hand in Cáceres. The characteristic that best defines symbolic thought is language. Did they have language? The gene FOXP2 is an essential gene in the development of human language. Certain mutations in this gene make speech impossible. When we compare this gene in humans and hominids, comparing the sequence of letters in the DNA, we see that we have an A where the others have a C. What do Neanderthals have? An A. They have the same gene version as us. Ignacio Martinez of the Atapuerca team and successfully tried to reconstruct the Neanderthal phonatory apparatus from fossils. Then a great idea occurred to him. As the mission of wars is as important as the reception, they started to reconstruct the anatomy of the ears of several hominids. This reconstruction is what you see in the image, those volumes of different colors. Their conclusion? Neanderthals had an ear like ours. Presumably, they could speak. All the characteristics that we have referred to until very recently were considered exclusive to us, the Homo sapiens. If Neanderthals had them, were they as human as us? Just saying. The roots of symbolic thought go beyond sapiens. Myth 3. Humans haven't had offspring with other species. This is Deni. She lived in Russia 0.09 million years ago. We only have a finger bone from her. Analyzing her DNA, they discovered that half of its chromosomes were from a Neanderthal, her mother, and the other half from her father, a Denisovan, another type of Homo. She is a hybrid. Okay, Neanderthals and Denisovans had offspring, but what about us, the sapiens? Thanks to the discoveries of Svante Pääbo and his team, today we know that many of us have between 1 and 2% of Neanderthal DNA. Obviously, that's because we had babies with them. Not only that, there are also populations of sapiens with between 1 and 6% of Denisovan DNA. It seems that reproducing with close species was not so rare. So, can it be said that sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans belong to the same species? It's a controversial issue. Two organisms belong to the same species if they can interbreed to produce fertile offspring, that is, if they can have grandchildren. According to this, the three of us belong to the same species. On the other hand, morphologically we are different. It's easy to differentiate a Neanderthal skeleton from a human one. Furthermore, if we have 2% of Neanderthal DNA, it's because the remaining 98% is sapiens. Essentially, we are sapiens. There is no clear answer. I'll give you my opinion. When we humans try to understand the world, we simplify it. We establish category sets with clear limits. Most of the time, what we observe in nature fits what we have defined. But nature is so complex that we can always find cases that escape our categories. In this diagram, the similarities in the DNA of several species are represented. In it, the species that are closest to each other are the most similar. There is no doubt that chimps and humans cannot reproduce. We are clearly different species, and in the diagram, we are very far apart. However, we are very close to Neanderthal and Denisovan. This implies that it wasn't long ago that we began to separate from them. On the one hand, we have been far enough away from Neanderthals to be morphologically different, but on the other hand, not long enough to completely prevent reproduction. There is no specific moment in which a species appears. The formation of a species is a gradual process. Myth 4. Humans descend from a single woman, the Mitochondrial Eve. The term Mitochondrial Eve has been much in the press and generated many misconceptions. Mitochondrial Eve lived 0.2 million years ago in Africa, and to understand her discovery, you must know the following things. The molecular clock technique consists of comparing two DNA sequences and counting the differences between them. Assuming that the differences are due to mutation, changes in the sequence of DNA letters and that mutation appeared at a constant rate, which is not exactly true but is accurate enough, assuming that you can calculate how long ago these individuals were separated. In this made-up example, a mutation occurs every 100 years. The DNA of two individuals differ by 4 letters, 4 mutations, so 2 mutations for each of them. If one mutation happens every 100 years, 2 mutation means that both had a common ancestor that lived 200 years ago. The other info. Most of the DNA of a human being is in the nucleus of the cell, but we also have a small compartment inside the cell, the mitochondrion, which has its own DNA. In the image is drawn an egg cell and a sperm cell, both with their respective DNA, nuclear and mitochondrial. In fertilization, an individual will come out with a mixture of nuclear DNA from both parents, but the mitochondrial DNA will be only from their mother. Since there is no mixing of DNA, the study of mitochondrial DNA makes it easier to trace our female ancestor. This is why they apply the molecular clock technique to the mitochondrial DNA of humans from all over the world. In doing so, they came to the conclusion that we are all descended from Mitochondrial Eve, a woman from sub-Saharan Africa who lived 200,000 years ago. So far there is nothing false. Where is the myth? Well, it's assumed that this woman was the only woman, following the parallelism with Adam and Eve in the Bible, and it's not. It's estimated that there were thousands of women at that time, and those of us living today are descended from many of them, and have their DNA in our cell nuclei. Only our mitochondrial DNA descends exclusively from this Eve, and not because she was unique, the first, or the best. She was the lucky one, the one who had daughters, who have come down to us. Human beings are not descended from a single woman. Myth 5. Humans appeared in a specific place and time. This myth allows us to deepen what was explained in the previous one. This is a good one, for now the oldest specimen of Homo sapiens. It was found in Morocco and is 0.3 million years old. His skull is oval, a characteristic of archaic Homo, but surprisingly his face is flat, typical of modern sapiens. At the time of its discovery, this was the oldest sapiens skull. It was 0.16 million years old. Its shape is modern, more globular. Its face is also modern, flat, but it has prominent eyebrows, a typical character of archaic Homo. It was found in Herto, Ethiopia, and this is its reconstruction. Also in East Africa, in a 2,000-year-old site, Homo 1 and Homo 2 were found. 2 skulls of the same age, but one of them looks more archaic than the other. There is no evidence of a clear trend towards a modern type of skull. The study of archaeology related to sapiens gives similar results. The most sophisticated stone tools, the use of pigments, the collection of objects without practical purposes, the shell necklaces, and the geometrical marks on shells, all the oldest remains of these are spread throughout Africa. There is no specific point of origin. The paleontological and archaeological data coincide in a Pan-African origin. What about the genetic data? Also, DNA analysis of current non-human population shows that the most genetically diverse individuals are Africans, as shown in this map of genetic diversity. As we move away from Africa, people become less diverse, with the lowest diversity found in South American populations. What can be deduced from the fact that the African population are the most diverse? That they are the oldest. The map shows different genetic population of sapiens distributed throughout Africa. When sapiens left Africa, some people would live from some of these populations, but not all of them, so that all the diversity was in Africa and part of it in Arabia. When Arabian population migrated to India, more of the same. A few would live, and diversity in India would be reduced. In sum, the data suggests that Africa was inhabited by very varied population of Homo sapiens, in which individuals with different combination of archaic and modern traits coexisted. Many of these populations alternated seasons in which they remained isolated with others in which they reproduced among themselves. These cycles, repeated over hundreds of thousands of years, ended up giving rise to the current Homo sapiens. This is the so-called African multi-regionalism model that seems to be imposing itself on the others. Sapiens arose from different populations mixing over hundreds of thousands of years. Myth 6. Love doesn't fossilize. I can help to tell you what Ignacio Martinez from the Atapuerca team describes so well. In the Cima de los Huesos, Spain, 0.4 million years ago lived Benjamina, a girl belonging to the species Homo heidelbergensis. Although many consider her to be Neanderthal, we have already learned that the boundaries between the species are blurred. This girl has a severely deformed skull, which had caused her brain not to grow normally, and as a consequence, she was mentally and physically retarded. But this girl survived 11 years. It was because the group waited for her, cared for her, did everything. It's difficult to find a practical reason why they did it. Most likely, they did out of love. Virtually everything can be deduced from fossils. Myth 7. Meat consumption caused the brain to grow. This is the Peking man, a Homo erectus found in China that lived 0.7 million years ago. Erectus is supposed to be the first Homo out of Africa, had greater cranial capacity than previous Homo, control of fire, and was able to hunt big game. Their stone tools are significantly better than those of his ancestors. In their creation process, planning was necessary. The Peking man knew that to reach a final outcome, he had to take some intermediate steps without immediate meaning. This mental leap is astonishing. The myth consists of affirming that eating meat increases the size of the brain. It cannot be. To explain this, it would be necessary to find a mechanism in which eating meat would modify the DNA in such a way that would give rise to a larger brain, and such a mechanism doesn't exist. Inherited changes in brain size either are caused by mutation or by new combination of genes that occur during sexual reproduction. Both random processes. In my video on evolution, you can go into more detail about it. However, it's possible to explain it in the following way. In a population of vegetarian hominins appeared mutation that resulted in an increase of the brain. The brain is an organ that demands a lot of energy, and the vegetarian diet that our ancestors had didn't provide them with enough energy to maintain those larger brains. In this scenario, individuals with large brains would die, and their mutation would never be passed on to the next generation. On the contrary, if in a population that eats meat, by chance individuals with DNA that give them larger brains are born, Since meat provides an energy-rich diet, they can survive, reproduce, and have offspring that inherit those big brains. The consumption of meat didn't create larger brains, it allowed their selection. Myth 8. Human evolution is linear, tending towards increasingly larger brains. It's time to unlearn the false and harmful view proposed by this image. It suggests that evolution is a linear process that gradually and predictably transforms organisms into better versions of their ancestors, with a white man from Homo sapiens as the ultimate goal. Completely wrong. As almost always happens in misleading information, there are facts in the image that are correct. In this other picture, different species are arranged according to age. It is shown how the brain increases and the face becomes flatter. The timeline and appearance of this species is accurate. But does this image show all hominin species that lived at those times? No. Johnny's child is a specimen of Homo habilis that lived in Africa 1.8 million years ago. He walked like Australopithecus, but had a larger brain. The bones of the hand also were different from his ancestor bones. Those fingers allowed him a precise grip, a fine manipulation of objects. The increase in brain size and this grip are related to the ability to create simple stone tools. Although simple, resulting from a single blow, is a giant leap forward. It involves seeing something in the stone, something that is not there, knowing that inside a round stone there is an edge, and with that edge you can cut the flesh of an animal. Australopithecus BioGea and Homo rudolfensis also lived 1 million years ago. There is variability in their brains. BioGea has the smallest, habilis the intermediate one, and rudolfensis the largest. This graph shows how at different times in human evolution, species with different skull sizes coexisted. At this point you might think, that is not a big deal. Although during the evolutionary process there were all kinds of brain sizes, the reality is that we started with small brains and ended up with larger ones. Well, it's really important, because the theory of evolution wouldn't be able to show a mechanism that would make the size of the brain always grow. However, the theory of evolution perfectly explains that due to random processes, both large and small brains appear, as you see in the image. Later, natural selection would select or eliminate them depending on whether they were an advantage or a disadvantage in their particular environment. Human evolution follows a tree-like web. Myth 9. Large brains were the first trait to evolve in human evolution. Meet Lucy, an Australopithecus that lived in Africa 3.2 million years ago. She is no longer able to climb in trees like her ancestor. She has a completely bipedal posture. Look at her hips. Is it more like a human's or a chimp's? It's more similar to human hips, short and wide. Now compare its skull. In this case, it's more similar to that of a chimp, small and without forehead. Lucy walked like a human and had a chimp-like brain. Bipedalism evolved before large brains. This example also illustrates how evolution works. Living beings are a mixture of characteristics that change at different times and at different speeds. Bipedalism evolved first. Myth 10. Tropical forests turning into savanna drove bipedalism. According to the incorrect explanation, African tropical forests were inhabited by primates perfectly adapted to climbing trees, unable to maintain an upright posture. When a drier climate turned forests into savanna, primates had an advantage moving on two legs. That caused the appearance of bipedalism. The question is, how was the savanna able to modify the DNA of an organism to generate bipedal traits and pass them on to the next generation? No way. How was it? Ardipithecus, Ardi to their friends, a human ancestor that is not a chimpanzee ancestor, lived in the African forest 4.5 million years ago. At that time, a variety of primate species coexisted, some better adapted to climbing trees than others. The peculiarity of Ardi is that in addition to being a great climber, he could walk bipedally. When forests turned into savanna, Ardi had an advantage. Bipedalism is more energy efficient, walking more, spending less. It allows you to spot predators hidden in the grass, and it makes it easier to reduce body temperature in a hot climate, since less surface area is exposed to the sun and more to the breeze. These advantages meant that Ardi survived longer, reproduced more, and their descendants inherited his DNA, a DNA that coded for bipedalism. The environment doesn't create traits, it selects them. Myth 11. Humans descend from chimpanzees. After centuries of rejecting human evolution, it seems that a lot of us now accept that human beings have evolved from other primates, commonly said that we came from apes. The problem is that some think that we descended from current apes, from chimpanzees, and chimps aren't an ancestor. Chimps are as modern as we are. 7 million years ago there were no humans, no chimps, but Homo lived in Africa. He belonged to the genus Sahelanthropus and is the most recent common ancestor between us and chimps. Homo is a common grandfather, and chimps our cousins. Humans and chimps share a recent common ancestor. This is all. I hope you enjoy learning. Thank you.